pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, welcome everybody here to the meeting tonight. We got a pretty good turnout. At least it isn't a snow blizzard this time. Welcome Jeff White from Richmond Lennox EMS. He's going to be giving us a demonstration. We have Sean O'Donnell from the Sheriff Department here. He's going to be saying a few words, I hope.
I have at least three, I can say.
Yeah. So, Jeff, if you want
Do
to.
you want me to start? I didn't know Sean wanted to
You go right ahead.
Okay. So good evening. For those I haven't met before, my name is Jeff White. I run the local emergency medical service that serves Casco Township. The organization is called Richmond Lennox EMS. We're actually owned by Richmond Lennox Township, but we, our communities that own the EMS contract out our services to you folks in Casco here. Just to give you some background, as local residents, we responded a little over 200 times in Casco Township here last year. Because a lot of people talk about it these days, we had about 7 runs for opioid issues here or heroin kind of overdoses here in the township, so we do see a little bit of that. I will tell you that your community matches your neighboring communities with those kind of numbers. So you're not higher, you're not lower, you're right where everybody else is, but I seem to always get that question when I'm in a group these days. It is really a crisis, it is really an epidemic in the area, and we are seeing just as much of it as you read about in the paper and see on the newspaper these days. The EMS operates in this area with 6 ambulances, and like I say, our total response to your community were right about 200 last year. So we're here quite a bit, actually. Tonight I was asked to come out and talk a bit about basic first aid and care and treatment of persons that might be severely injured or ill. A course to really do all of this takes about 6 hours. We're going to condense that down into about 90 minutes tonight. We're not going to be certifying anybody here tonight. If you're interested in a course that certifies, I'll give you a phone number, and I can repeat it at the end of the meeting if you'd like, but you can just call the EMS office. It's 586-727-2184. We do 1 class a month at our new building on 32 Mile Road that is open to the public. All you have to do is show up. It's the second Saturday of the month. And we also do classes for groups that are expecting us to be there for 4 to 6 hours. So whether it's a church, school, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, any organization that wants to actually receive certification, we can come out and do that. But like I say, it takes a little longer than the time we'll have this evening. Having said that, what we're going to show you tonight, you could all use. We're going to demonstrate a lot of things. We're just not going to have time to practice them all with you. And so most of what I'm going to show you is pretty easy to do, pretty easy to use, and I would encourage any of you in an emergency situation to use what I've showed you tonight. In Michigan, you are all protected under the Good Samaritan Act, and so that means unless you are a licensed healthcare professional operating in that capacity, so a paramedic, a nurse in an emergency room, a doctor, operating in that capacity, you are pretty much safe from a liability perspective. Okay? I didn't say you won't get sued. I said that you'll probably win if you do. just for the record. Otherwise, since we're on tape, I'll have some lawyer calling me and reminding me. So with that, I think I'll just get into the reason I'm here, which is to talk about emergencies that we can quickly control as the lay public, if you will. So let's start with how to first control an emergency. First and foremost, call 911. Don't assume that anyone else has. You can call 911 these days. You can text 911 now here in St. Clair County, but call 911 and get help on the way. Okay? Remember that with your cell phones, which is what most people operate on these days, there's a lot of folks, just by show of hands, who still has landlines in their house? It's okay if you do or don't. Okay. A few of you do, and that's okay. That's actually probably a good backup thing to have. We don't discourage them at all. In fact, when you pick up your phone and dial 911 from a landline in your home, when it rings at the St. Clair County Central Dispatch Center, which is who calls us out to runs in your community, we know where your house is at. We get the address, location, all those kind of things. If you call 911 from your cell phone and you've not entered into the new county system, there's a new county system, by the way, that you can enter into, where you can enter in your address and other information where you live, okay? But a lot of people have not yet done that. You have to, when you use your cell phone, tell us where you're at.
And doesn't that, when you activate your location, because my phone always knows where I'm at, even if I'm not telling it.
It does not on your cell phone. That's I
have dialed 911 and they've told me where I am.
they'll get close, but they might not get your exact location, and or depending on what tower you happen to affiliate with when your cell phone rings will determine how accurate your location
Yeah,
is.
they told me
So-
where I was on 94, they knew exactly where I was.
Did they? Yeah, and so sometimes it's better than others, but we don't tell people to rely on it. You can rely on the landlines. You can't always rely on the cell signals, especially if you're in an area with poor cell signal, like I say, or your tower happens to affiliate with a tower in Macomb County, for instance. And what I mean by affiliate is it captures that tower and sends the signal from there. And we get calls from time to time, especially up in the north, more northern part of the St. Clair County here, where we get calls that the callers in St. Clair County, they place the call to 911. It's answered in Lapeer. They transfer it back to St. Clair County, and they get us on the way. So these things happen, and so cell phones aren't bad. Call 911 on them. Just know that when you do, you need to be prepared to share with the caller, with the dispatcher, where you're at. Because the worst thing that can happen for us is for you to call dispatch, say, geez, I'm, someone in my home is having a heart attack. I need you here right away. Please send an ambulance. Click. And we don't know where to go. And that happens to us probably a couple of times a month. And so the dispatch will call us and they'll say, be ready. You're going to get a call somewhere for a person having a heart attack. And we say, okay, we're ready. And that's the best that we can do.
Can't they call back?
They will try.
I mean, don't they have caller ID and they just call right back?
They will try. They will make those efforts or whatever. But again, depending on cell signal and other issues, they may or may not reach you. So I'm just letting you know that the system is very good, and it's not perfect. And so we need to know that when we make those calls, we need to tell them where we're located at. Okay, so call 911, tell them where we're at, tell them what the problem is. We'll be on the way. Okay, and the sheriffs will be on the way, and in some cases the fire department will be on the way, or whoever you need. So with that, so we have a medical emergency in our house. Let's talk about a really common one. Really common medical emergency that we have in our house is people choking. We all eat, and when we eat, people tend to choke because of it. And people choke for no apparent reason. It's not like other things where it's a health issue or a lifestyle issue or whatever. Young people, old people, people with various medical conditions all choke. Okay. The good news is, because I think a lot of people attend things like this and people hear about it and have seen it on even television, if that's what it takes for people to be educated about this stuff, know how to do the Heimlich maneuver. And the Heimlich maneuver is really just a process for getting out a piece of food or something that's obstructing an airway. Okay, so something that somebody's eaten that's too big, it doesn't go down the right pipe, if you will, it goes into the trachea and not the esophagus. It blocks off our airway and we can't breathe. All right. Again, the good news about that is that because a lot of people know the Heimlich maneuver already, I would say in 99 out of 100 cases when we respond to choking victims, the choking victim is breathing just fine when we arrive. That doesn't mean you shouldn't call us, because there's going to be that time when the object won't come out for you. And it's better to have us on the way and call us back and say, geez, the person's not choking anymore. And we'll usually continue out just to check and make sure all's well anyways. Okay? So let's talk about how to do the Heimlich maneuver a little bit. So I'm going to borrow Joe. Because Joe's a good man. All right? And so, if you can stay right here for me, Joe. All right? People that choke, the people that are truly choking and have a true airway obstruction cannot communicate at all. They can't talk, they can't cough, they can't sneeze, they can't make a sound. Okay? Why? Because the object, whatever that was, the piece of meat or whatever it was, sits above the level anatomically of the vocal cords. Right. So you can't push air, the air will push through the vocal cords, but it's going to stop right where that meat is, if you will, and it's not going to come out. So first, somebody's coughing, hacking, gagging, what have you, they're probably going to be okay. Call 911, get them head down, okay, and let them cough it out. In most cases, they're going to cough it out. Don't hit them on the back particularly. People always want to do that. Don't pull their hands over their head. We don't hit them on the back. Why? Because it makes people take a deep breath. And don't pull their hands over their head like our moms used to do with us when we were kids, right? Sorry, Mom. And they used to pull our hands over our heads, right? And what we do is our head goes back like this. And now gravity's pulling the object back down into our throat. So just head down and let them cough and gag. Reassure them. Tell them it's going to be okay. That's really what you can do, okay? If they stop making noise, or if they've stopped making noise, generally speaking, people will grab their throat, just like on television. They will grab just like this, and they will be looking at you like, please help me. Okay, because they want you to do something for them. When they do that, very simply, all you do is take one hand and make a fist. Take the other hand, put it about the middle of their stomach. You don't have to be exact for this. Okay, you need to work fast. Put the other hand on top of it. Again, head down and pull up and in. Okay, we're not going to do it real hard to Joe because I don't want to hurt him or whatever. But and pull up and in. And when do we stop pulling up and in? We stop pulling up and in when Joe either becomes unconscious or when the object comes out. If he becomes unconscious, we lower him to the ground, and we start compressing on his chest to see if we get the object to come out. Okay, and we do that until again the object either comes out or EMS arrives and takes over from him. But we don't stop for any reason. Okay, you can sit down or whatever if you want to. So basically, Heimlich maneuver, middle of the chest, fist, pull up and in. I tell people it's kind of like, if you imagine, it's kind of like constricting a balloon. If you've ever, and we've all done it, at some time in your life, you've taken a balloon and you started squeezing it at the bottom, and you didn't let any air back into the bottom, you kept squeezing it, and eventually it popped. All we're doing is trying to pop the balloon, okay, in the case of choking. We're just trying to push that air up until we finally pop the balloon, and normally, what gives way first is that object that's sitting in the air. Okay? Normally, we don't have to cut holes in people's necks or even go down with the instrument to get the object out. Normally, you guys do it for us before we ever get there. TV makes it look like we have to do those things all the time. We don't do that much at all, if you will, because you guys normally take care of it.
Good question.
Yes?
What if somebody falls down and they're laying down?
Right. So now they've collapsed on the ground, and so we'll get our mannequin, and I'm going to actually leave him up here just so it's easier for people to see. Because if I get down on the ground, it's hard for folks in the back of the room to see. Okay. If he's down here, the new rule is simply begin your compressions on the chest just as you would if the person was in cardiac arrest. It used to be we pushed up and in on the abdomen, we did some of that stuff, but generally speaking, by this point in time, the patient's heart's also getting weak, and so for us to compress the chest, we're also pushing some air, and we're compressing the heart all at the same time. Okay, so some rules, if you've taken a CPR class before, some rules about this stuff has changed, if you will. The only thing we do is if we expect it's a choking incident, we keep inspecting their mouth to see if we've popped anything out. So you look to see if there's some piece of meat, hot dog, piece of steak, whatever it is. Those are things commonly people choke on, by the way. That we can see in there. So, by the way, I eat a lot of hot dogs and steaks, so I'm never picking on anybody's food. I'm just saying those are things we do see people choke on a lot. So with that, just continue to push, like I say, on the chest, and you'll be doing both CPR and, if you will, and hopefully getting the item out of the airway. Which leads us into CPR. So the great segue. So CPR, and if you come take a complete CPR program, we're going to talk a little differently about it than we do here tonight. But what we've learned about CPR in the last 18 months, really, has really changed the way we think about things and what we do, even in the field as paramedics. And so, so like with everything else in medicine, the world is ever changing, and sometimes it sounds like we're going backwards a bit, but really we're learning that some of the old things we used to do work better than some of the new things that we were trying. And so, what we've learned is this, and it's a little embarrassing to say as a person who's kind of studied the science of medicine for a lot of years. You know, we don't exhale oxygen. We don't exhale oxygen, right? Yeah, we exhale poison, actually. And so, for years, the CPR standard has been do CPR, press on their chest, tilt their head back and breathe in their mouth, right? You all heard that. You'd seen somebody do it before on TV. You'd do whatever. I mean, we were all thinking, wow, we got to breathe for these people. Not so much. No. In fact, we think maybe we were doing some damage because we were filling their lungs full of poison, and then we were circulating it around their body with chest compressions. And so, we've really said to the lay public, probably ventilation in many, many cases, and there are some cases when it's still important, but in the vast majority of cases, ventilation, that breathing into the mouth, isn't really that important. We believe that the blood holds more oxygen after a person's heart stops than what we initially thought, and holds it for a longer period than what we initially thought. And by avoiding poisoning it, the oxygen probably stays there a considerable amount longer. And so, if somebody collapses for whatever reason, whether it's a choking incident, which could be one reason, or whether it's because they have a heart attack that causes them to collapse into cardiac arrest, we're just going to do chest compressions. Now let's back up a little bit and talk about why these things happen. So why most cardiac arrest happens is because the heart is beating along. We are doing fine. We are walking around just looking like we do here in this classroom tonight. And at any given time, one of us can have a clot that forms and breaks loose and plugs an artery that feeds our heart. This isn't the blood that's pumping around our system. This is the blood that feeds the heart. And it blocks one of those arteries for the blood that feeds the heart. And the heart goes into, generally speaking, an initial rhythm that we call ventricular fibrillation. You don't have to remember that, but if you're watching TV, that's the real squiggly line that doesn't look like it matches anything on their monitors. And the heart initially goes into that rhythm, and the person collapses into cardiac arrest. And eventually, if untreated, that line goes completely flat. We call that asystole, or flat line. And at that point, the person, generally speaking, doesn't survive. That time from that squiggly line to that time of that flat line is, we think, about 4 to 8 minutes before that happens. So, what we know is this. Even if you live in the house across the street from the EMS, I always feel bad for those people because they get woke up in the middle of the night by us all the time. But even if you live in that house across the street from the EMS, it probably takes us 3 minutes to get in your living room. Why? Because you call 911, they confirm your address, they set off our tones, these noises that go off on these pagers that we wear. We jump up, we look at the address, we map where we're going, we get to the truck. If it's the middle of the night, we put our boots on. We get the doors open, we start the truck, we get it out of the garage, we get it across the street from the EMS, and we get our equipment all out of the truck and we come in. I'm betting we don't get in your living room any faster than 3 minutes. That's the person that lives across the street from our station. So if you live in Casco Township, you have to multiply that by us getting from that building on 32 Mile Road or the building at 27 in Gratiot. Those are usually the two buildings that come to your community here, depending on what part of the community. If you live in the south part of the community, you're generally getting served out of our building at 27 in Gratiot. If you live in the northern part of half of your community, you're generally getting served out of our building on 32 Mile Road. but generally speaking, it's gonna be, in good weather, it's about 8 to 9 minutes for us to get to your house. In a snowstorm, like you were talking about having at the beginning of your last meeting, it can be 12, 14 minutes. Because ambulances don't go through snow any better than your personal cars. So when we have a snowstorm, we're slowed down just like you are. We still come with our lights and siren, we still come as soon as we can, but it doesn't do us any good if we put the truck in the ditch on the way to your house. So, so we're slowed down as well. So we've got, 8 minutes at best, and we're not gonna make it. It's like so many things you're going to hear about in this, in being part of the neighborhood watch and be ready programs and all those kind of things they talk about is make sure you and your family are ready for a period of time to take care of yourself. What I'm here to tell you is EMS saves far more lives by doing community education than we do by driving around in ambulances. Think about that. We get hailed as heroes. We're not heroes. We save far more lives talking to groups like you and getting you prepared than we do driving those trucks. So I really appreciate y'all being here and being willing to listen for a while tonight about what you can do to help yourself or help a member of your family. So if a person goes into cardiac arrest for whatever the reason, whether it's medically, whether it's traumatically, which could be from blood loss. Those ones are a little bit hard to save. I'll explain a little bit more about why that is in a minute, so I don't confuse things too much. Or whether it's from a choking kind of situation, we treat them all the same. They go into cardiac arrest, they end up collapsing to the floor. We call 911 if it hasn't already been done. Maybe it was already done because they were saying, my chest has been hurting, and then they collapse. But we call 911, okay? The really great thing that our dispatchers, the actual folks that give us the calls, they are amazing. They do just a phenomenal job. And while I shared with you that the system, the technology isn't perfect always, and so you have to help the technology along sometimes, the people who answer those phones, they're tremendous. And they will actually talk you through what to do next. So as much as I'm telling you a little bit about it tonight, they'll tell you what to do. So you call 911, you say we've got a person collapsed. The first thing we do is we shake and shout. We try to wake them up, right? Because some people collapse not because they have heart attacks. Some people collapse because they had a seizure. Some people collapse because they had a stroke. Some people collapse because they've had too much to drink. Some people collapse because of blood sugar. That's probably the most common one, by the way, the reason people collapse. Some people collapse due to drug overdose, okay? But whatever the case, the first thing we do is we shake and shout. We say, hey, sir, or if it's your family member, call them by name. When I say shake and shout, I mean we shake and shout, okay? Don't rub them. Don't say, dear, are you okay? Sweetheart, is it going to be all right? No, I want you to shake and shout, right? Because I want you to see if you can startle them. Because you might just startle them back awake, okay? Especially in the case of like a person that collapses from things like a diabetic emergency. So they'll collapse, they'll fall to the floor. A person can't swallow their tongue, by the way. Try it. I'm awake, alert, and I cannot swallow my tongue. Okay? So a person can't swallow their tongue. But what happens when they collapse, their tongue does relax a bit back in their airway. They will stop breathing or breathe poorly when they're collapsed. And sometimes all it takes is just getting them alert enough to get them sat back up a little bit, to get them that little bit more awake, and they'll start breathing again on their own. Okay, because they've collapsed because of that stroke, that sugar issue, that diabetic issue. All right, so that's the first effort. If they don't wake up for you after you've really shook and shouted and tried everything you can to get them awake, if they don't wake up for you, the next thing we used to do was check their pulse. Now I see there's a lady in scrubs in the room, so I'm going to pick on her for a minute. She might know how to take a pulse. I don't know what she does, but she's wearing scrubs, so you always pick on the lady in the scrubs. What's that?
Receptionist.
Oh, gotcha. So maybe not so much. But what we found out, what we learned, is the lay public, all of you, respectfully, weren't very good at taking pulses. Because unless you take them every day, they're pretty hard to find. in all honesty. Some of you are better than others. I mean, if you exercise a lot and you really know where to feel on your own body, you can get your own pulse. But when we were telling people, you know, kind of feel here around the neck. I mean, if you look around the room even here, I'm not picking on anybody, we all have different sized necks, right? We have people who have really thin necks. They're pretty easy to find a pulse in. We have guys who have thicker necks, pretty tough to find pulses in, okay? Elderly people, as age advances, the pulse in the neck gets a lot weaker, and we can't always find it. And what we found out was compressing the chest really doesn't hurt anybody. You might break a rib, but given the alternative of being dead, it really isn't a bad thing. And oh, by the way, if you give a couple compressions and the person wakes up, it might not have been your compressions that restarted their heart, but you might have just, you know, startled them enough to get them awake. Either way, it worked, right? So once they collapse, we don't take pulses anymore. We shake and shout. We shake and shout a lot, and if all else fails, we start CPR. Okay? Some of you have taken a CPR class in the room. Sometime in your life, who's taken a CPR class? Brush your hands. Okay? The next thing we used to do is we used to give you this really crazy measurement thing. We'd say, take about 2 fingers and feel up here between their belly until you get to this point here that we call the xiphoid process. We just like to just say xiphoid process because it sounded cool. And then put 2 fingers there, and then try to figure out where to put your hand next to that, and then start compressing the chest, right? Well, that's fine, I guess. Seemed to work all right, for the most part. But man, everybody's got a different size belly, you know? And again, it goes back to kind of, I'm not going to pick on people, but let's just face it. Some of us got bigger bellies than others, right? And so on some people, feeling that area up there and trying to find that xiphoid process was really easy. And other people, it was a little tough. Okay? So now we just tell you to bare the chest. So in other words, get as much of the clothes off as you can. If you can't get the clothes off, don't worry about it, in all honesty. But if you can get down to bare skin, it's better. You'll actually know where you're going to push. Find an area in the middle of the chest. Okay? So just observe. Again, we don't talk about xiphoid process. We don't talk about the nipple line. We don't talk about those things because those anatomically are different on everybody. Okay? And so we find the center of the chest. We put one hand over the center of the chest. We put the other hand on top of it, and we compress. And how often do we compress? Well, they say they want you to compress to about 100 to 120 times a minute, which is quite a bit.
What's that song they want you to sing?
They want you to sing Staying Alive.
Yeah.
So for those of us dating ourselves and remember John Travolta, I think it was, and the Staying Alive song, you can do Staying Alive. Having said that, if you say that to a group of 16-year-olds, they have absolutely no idea what it's about. Okay? So I don't always use the Staying Alive song just because only folks some of our age would remember that. All right? What I tell people is this. We want you to compress about 2 to 2.5 inches. What's 2 to 2.5 inches? I don't know what 2.5 inches. I've been doing this 30 years. I've done CPR probably 1,000 times, maybe more than that. I don't know what 2.5 inches is when I do CPR. I know that when I push down on a human chest, I can feel the elasticity go out of it. And when I push down far enough that I don't feel elasticity anymore, I let it release. And I will also tell you that if you push down and let the chest recoil all the way, okay, almost to the point of letting your hands come off the chest, but not quite. All right? We used to say never take your hand off the chest. I saw a cardiologist one day on a golf course. It was down at Oak Ridge Golf Course a number of years ago. Honest to goodness, his friend collapsed in a cardiac arrest. The cardiologist was doing this when we got there. We got there. The gentleman was getting good perfusion from CPR being done by the cardiologist. We hooked him up, we defibrillated him. He woke up and sat up. Didn't remember being in cardiac arrest at all. I point that out to say all the cardiologist was doing was pushing in the middle of his chest. Okay? I'm not suggesting you all hit him in the chest like that. But I'm suggesting that you find the middle of the chest, you push down until you feel elasticity come out, you let it recoil all the way until your hands just about come off, and then you push down again. Why do we want it to recoil all the way? We want it to really recoil all the way because it lets the heart refill with blood, and then when we push down again, it gets the full ejection of that blood back to the brain. Okay? And so, if you do that, and you literally, each time you let it recoil all the way, you push back down, you're going to be right about 120 compressions a minute. So we don't have to do 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. We don't count anymore. Okay, we just push down and we let it recoil fully. And we keep doing this until CPR arrives, or until EMS arrives. Okay? Or, unless, if you have another rescuer show up on the scene, because you're going to get tired doing this. As much as your adrenaline's pumping, and as much as you want to help your family member, your friend, your neighbor you don't even know, but because you're here, you want to help people, okay, you will get tired. 3 or 4 minutes of this is about all anybody that's not like a marathon runner can do well. Now, you may keep going past 4 minutes. And if there's nobody else there, we certainly encourage you to. But you will not be doing it as well. So if somebody else walks up, another neighbor, a friend, a family member, somebody that says, I know CPR, don't be too proud to say, go ahead. Take over from me. I've been at this a while. I'm a little tired. Because we find that the better that compression is, the better the chance the patient has of surviving. And if we maintain that 120 beats or so a minute, and if we can keep those compressions deep until the elasticity comes out and let them recoil all the way, and if you're doing that, you're going to wear yourself out, then in fact, we're going to save more people. So we encourage that change out. There's no fancy change out anymore. If you remember old classes, they had this funny mnemonic, I don't remember, change on, next breath, something, whatever. I don't even remember how you did it, in all honesty. I really don't, because that's not what we did in the field. When we change somebody out in the field, we go, your turn. And the other guy gets in and does CPR. There's no funny message, there's no little rhyme. Your turn. The next guy comes in, he starts CPR. In fact, on the ambulances now we have a machine that does the CPR for us. It frees up our people to do some of the other medical care, and the machine does better CPR than we can. Because the machine doesn't get tired. So once we arrive, we put them on the machine, and the machine actually compresses the chest for us. So anyway, so that's kind of CPR on an adult. Let's talk briefly about so in a lot of places while we're on the CPR topic, a lot of places have available to them automated external defibrillators. We have one here in the Casco Township Hall somewhere, right?
I have no idea.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot. There used to be an AED in this building.
Yeah, there used to be, but I don't know if it's here or not.
So we should probably learn if that's here or not, and we'll figure that out, and we'll get it somewhere that it can be seen. Okay, if it is. But a lot of stores, a lot of places you'll travel have AEDs nowadays. Okay, they're all over the Richmond area. I can speak to that. They're at the library. They're at the senior center. They're at the pool. They're in a lot of our buildings. They're in the Myers store at 26 Mile Road. They are, like I said, there's a lot of these things around. They're in just about every airport you travel to. And like I say, they're in most stadiums, places where a lot of people collect. I know St. Pete's Church, I think St. A's Church both have one here locally in the Richmond area communities as well. So we try to make sure that we have these things where they have a large number of people to congregate for whatever the reason might be. So let's talk about maybe where you find AEDs, and where, if you're ever asked, if you're ever with a group, your church or whoever, and they say, where should you put an AED? If you look, I think one of the smartest things I've ever seen is when you go through most major metropolitan airports, generally AEDs are found by the bathrooms. Why? Because everybody can find a bathroom. Not everybody can find an AED, but everybody can find a bathroom. And so if you ever need an AED in an airport, tell somebody to look for it near the bathroom, because that's where you're going to find it. If you're at most other buildings, I tell people the same thing. Our churches, our schools, things like that. I say, put it by the bathroom. Everybody knows where the bathroom's at. They'll find the AED there.
Maybe that's where it is.
So that's always my recommendation. Some people don't love them there, but that's just an easy, common place that people can normally find. There's also normally more signage going to a bathroom than there is going to an AED. You know, there's not giant signs on the wall that say, you know, AED this way, but there's giant signs on the wall that say restrooms. Okay, in most places. So, so find the AED wherever it is. Send somebody for it if they know where it is, so you can keep doing CPR. Do not discontinue CPR while you're getting the AED. We think the CPR is probably even more important than the AED. Okay, but once you get the AED there, what we know is, remember when we talked a couple minutes ago, and I said, you know, you've got about 8 minutes for that squiggly line going to that flat line. If we can correct a problem with the heart while somebody's still in that squiggly line, if we can correct it then, we can save about 30% of the people who go into cardiac arrest. Still not a great number, but like I said, it's better than zero. Once they go to that flat line, we save about 2%. Once we get in your living room, if you will, heaven forbid, or your front lawn, or wherever we are in these cardiac arrest situations, and we put our device on and we see flat, we don't not work. We work just as hard as we always have to try to resuscitate that individual, but we know in the back of our mind, only 2 in 100 of those patients are going to survive. Okay? But if we can get there, and because of the CPR you've been doing, that squiggly line still going on, we got a chance. We got a really good chance of being able to convert that person, especially in otherwise healthy people. You know, you might not have as good a chance if people have a lot of medical problems, but you have a pretty good chance when people have been otherwise healthy and had a sudden, you know, what we call a sudden cardiac arrest, which meant it wasn't preceded by other illness. So we're going to do those compressions. But then, generally speaking, compressions by themselves don't wake anybody up from cardiac arrest. Not the true people that are either in the squiggly line or the flat line. It just doesn't wake them up. It's not like television that way. If they wake up because you're doing compressions, it's probably because they were having a seizure, a diabetic emergency, a stroke, something else, and you woke them up because you were pressing on their chest. And that's okay. That's not a bad thing. You did the right thing still, okay? But they weren't in a cardiac problem. Because what we know is the only thing that really wakes somebody up from a cardiac arrest, generally speaking, is an electrical shock to the heart. And the electrical shock to the heart actually takes that squiggly line. It'll only shock that squiggly line. So it takes that squiggly line, it stops it for a moment. So it stops the heart, actually, momentarily. And lets what's called the sinoatrial node, again, not a word you have to remember, other than there's this little node in the heart, it lets that reset.
It's a reset.
It's like when your computer freezes up. It's like pushing the power off and pushing the power back on and suddenly your computer works again. Pretty similar. We shut it off, we turn it back on, it reboots, and a lot of times it will restart in those situations. Sometimes it won't, but in a lot of times it will. And so what we're doing is resetting the computer, if you will, by giving it a little jolt of electricity. Okay? These devices, and those people, by the way, are actually the ones who will really wake up. We see people use AEDs in places on folks, and when we get there, they're sitting up talking. And these are people that were otherwise in cardiac arrest before our arrival. It's amazing, actually. And so we really strongly do encourage their use. So if you've got one, the beauty of these devices is I can talk all night long about how this device works. But here's the big thing I want to tell you. It's going to tell you how to do everything. Yep. The device talks to you. Okay? It's an autonomous car in a box. All right? It's going to do just about everything for you. There's a couple things that you have to do as the human intervener, but otherwise this machine does it all. So this machine that I have here is a trainer. So it will, it walks like a duck and talks like a duck and quacks like a duck. It just doesn't deliver energy like a duck in this case. So we'll just turn it on. We'll turn it on. There we go.
help now.
Device touch
Remove
call.
all clothing from patient's chest.
Now, at this point, all you need to know to do is to take these.
Pull red handle to open bag.
This usually has a red handle on it. You pull the red handle off.
Look
pop
at
out.
pictures on pads.
Look at the pictures. They'll show you
Peel
where
one
these
pad
go.
Off blue plastic. Apply pad to bare skin, exactly as shown in the picture. Press pad firmly. Peel other pad off blue plastic. Apply pad to bare skin, exactly as shown in the picture. Press pad firmly. Remove all clothing from patient's chest. Do not touch patient. Evaluating heart rhythm.
So now the machine's checking to see if it's got that squiggly line going on.
Stand by. Preparing to shock. Everyone clear. Press
This is when you
flashing
want to get
button.
away from the patient. You hear the machine warning you. You want to make sure nobody is touching the patient. You hit the button.
Shock delivered. Provide chest compressions and rescue breaths.
So this one still is telling you for rescue breaths. That's okay, by the way, but it just hasn't been updated with the new information. But you do go right back to chest compressions unless the person starts to wake up and talk to you. Why? Because we also believe
Continue care.
that there are times when the heart may reset and start. One of two things has happened now. Either that heart has reset and start, and you can help the heart to pump a little blood just by continuing to push on the chest until the person wakes up.
Continue care.
Or what they did is it shocked them, and when the restart happened, they went flat, which happens in, unfortunately, about 70% of the cases, in which case you need to get the CPR going again.
Continue
Okay.
care.
So let's touch on a couple of things about this device.
Continue care.
The one prompt that it doesn't give, interestingly, on the trainer, and we're not sure why, because this is made by the same company that we buy our equipment from, is the one thing that doesn't tell you is to plug the electrodes in. So you actually have to plug the electrode in the machine. Now a real machine actually tells you to plug the electrodes in after you take them out of the bag. Because it won't do anything if you don't plug the electrodes in. It can't read anything if you don't plug the electrodes in. There's only one, see, it's a funny looking little device on the end of there. It only goes in and out of the machine one way. Okay, and there's actually a little diagram on the machine that shows you, if you look and you line this up with that, it shows you how to put it in and where. Okay, so pretty simple, but we're not sure why the trainer doesn't give you the direction to plug it in. All right, so plug it in. Again, the electrodes have the location they're supposed to go, right, the picture on them. I was working kind of fast with them because I was working with the machine's voice, but I just wanted to review this with you. So it shows you right where to put these. Okay, having said that, there's no difference between them. If you apply these backwards, the machine will still shock. It's just electricity. It will still deliver the electric charge. It won't stop because it doesn't know where these pads are. The machine doesn't know that the pad's here and here. You can actually have them on babies, we put them on their front and back. Okay, kind of thing. The machine doesn't know. So, a couple of things that, so we made this look really easy, and for the most part it is. And I would not discourage anybody from grabbing one of these machines, turning it on. And let me just say this to you. What's the worst that's going to happen? Right? The person's dead or dying. Clinically, they're dead. You can't hurt them. Okay? So grab the machine, turn it on, listen to what it says. A couple of pitfalls with machines. Because nothing's ever this easy. Nothing's ever television easy. Okay? So a couple pitfalls. One, you got to get their chest bared. That can sometimes be a challenge, but don't worry about it. Shirts generally unbutton very easily if you just grab them at the center and pull. You just give them a yank, the buttons will generally pop on most men's shirts. On women's shirts, they generally will pull up fairly easily, okay? This can be in a crowded place with people around. We certainly we make every effort to protect people's dignity, but I think if I have a choice between my dignity and being alive, I'll take being alive every day.
Yeah.
You know, kind of thing. If you're in a home and you have a pair of scissors, paramedics, generally speaking, we all carry, when we're working on the trucks, we all carry a big pair of scissors in our pocket. If you see the guys walking around, they'll be stuck in the small of their back or whatever. You see a giant pair of scissors. And what we use them for, the only thing those scissors are good for in the world is cutting somebody's clothes off, basically. We start here, we cut their clothes off to here, and we open their chest and abdomen so we can, areas so we can see what we're doing and treat the patient or whatever. We try not to cut down jackets, that makes a mess. But anyways, but other than that, we cut most things. So you gotta get their chest bare. Pit follow machine. Once you get their chest bare, a couple things that can happen. One of which is people that go into cardiac arrest get very sweaty. Diaphoretic is the medical word for it, but they get just sweaty like trying to hold a wet fish when you pull it out of the lake. Okay, and so sometimes you need to dry their chest off a bit. And so a towel, a rag, your own T-shirt, if you need to pull your own shirt off to dry them off, you may have to get their chest dried off. The other thing that you run into with these is people with a lot of hair on their chest. Most AEDs we supply, we tell people to put 2 sets of pads in. They used to put razors in them, which was okay. Razors work all right, but you'd see poor people on a scene, and we'd show up and they'd still be trying to shave the person's chest because the hair was getting caught in the razor and it just didn't work very well and what have you. So we said, put 2 sets of pads in every machine. Why? Because the first set of pads that goes on, it won't stick very well because it'll be in their hair, but you wax them. Okay. Now, if they had any chance of waking up, that was going to do it. All right? Because you just gave them a good waxing. Then you throw that pair of electrodes away. If you have a second pair handy, you grab the other pair out and you put it right where the spots where you just waxed them.
Yep.
Okay? We do it all the time, or whatever. Drives the boss, that's me nuts, because we blow through 2 pairs of $50 pads, because that's what these cost a piece, but when you're saving somebody's life, you really don't worry about the cost. But we do it that way. It's much easier than trying to shave or anything else. It's just to use 2 sets of pads and get the hair out of our way.
Yeah, that picture in my head just is wrong.
So that's those are a couple of pitfalls. Otherwise, the only thing that we worry about with these machines ever is that I tried to stress a little bit when the machine was going through it. Certainly, there's a big alarm going on, what have you. Is when we're ready to deliver that shot, when you're the person that's going to push that button, you have to make certain that nobody else is touching the patient. And that sounds pretty easy, right up until you have the 65-year-old's wife insisting she's going to hold his hand. And you have to pry her away so that you can touch. Or they're going to give them one more kiss just about the time that you hit the shock button. And you have to just about deck them to get them out of the way because you don't want to hurt them, okay? And so getting people clear, one, that people don't need to be around. If they don't know what to do, then ask them to stand way back from the start. And then if they even do know what to do, make certain that the other people that have been helping you, the people that their adrenaline's pumping and they've been doing CPR and they're trying to save this guy, make sure they know that when that button goes off, they cannot be touching this patient. Why? Because if I have my hand on this patient and I'm standing, breathing, and my heart's beating just like it is now, we can wake this patient up and electrocute this individual. Okay? And so what you'll have happen is this person will be alive and this person will be laying on the floor dead.
Voltage-wise, what does that?
It's 200 joules. It's measured in joules, which is an electrician tried to explain it to me by some one day. Is anybody an electrician in the room? Because they usually understand.
But joules is frequency, right?
But yeah, and it basically transfers into like watts per second or whatever. And this is given over a millisecond. So it's a lot of energy, but it's given in such a short burst that that's why it works. So I'm not an electrophysicist or an electrician by trade, so I don't understand it fully. But I was in a class once and I had this electrician there, and he had it he was really good. I wish I could have taped him and replayed it for people because I get that question all the time because those guys really understand it better than I do. So you check it. The machine then, once you're doing CPR, will tell you after about 2 minutes, it'll time 2 minutes of CPR. It'll ask you to step away again from the patient. It will reevaluate the patient. And if the patient needs another shock, it'll tell you to shock him again. And if the patient doesn't need another shock, it will tell you to continue doing CPR. Why would the patient not need another shock? Either because their heart's beating, which is what we hope, and they just haven't woke up yet, or they've gone to that flatline state, which is not a rhythm that will, you could shock it all day long and nothing would happen. So you have to be in that wiggly line state in order for this to happen. I think one of the biggest questions we get, unfortunately, is when we're at people's homes, and we're taking care of their loved one. And the family, if we have enough people there, we'll generally put one of our people with the family to let them know what's going on. Because here we are in their living room doing all these things with their family, and people want to know. And the family will say, have you shocked him? Can you shock him again? And we'll explain, no, we're trying to get their hearts to wiggle again. We're putting medicine in it to try to get them back to that ventricular fibrillation state. And if we can, then we can shock him again. And so that's all we do that's different, is we try to put some medicine in there that for all intents and purposes irritates the heart. And if we put some medicine in and irritate the heart and get it back wiggly, then we can put our defibrillator on and shock. Okay? Usually a question I get, yep.
So if they're flatlined and you hit the button, you're just assuming it works at that point?
If they're flatlined, it won't let you hit this button. The button will never tell you to shock.
Okay.
The machine knows that that's a flat line and it won't ever say shock. So if that machine tells you to shock, they're in that wiggly line.
All right.
So
If their heart's beating, will it tell you to continue?
it will normally. If they haven't woke, the only reason that it's gonna tell you to continue. Your observation at this point is gonna make a decision of whether you do or not. So if it tells you to continue and suddenly the person's going, hey, ouch, that hurts, you can stop it. And I know that sounds funny, but that's really what happens. People wake up and go, why are you pushing on my chest? And we'll say, because you were in cardiac arrest, sir. And I'll say, no, I was not. That's the inevitable. They'll say, oh, no, yeah, you actually were. I can show you here in just a minute. But and so that really happens. People will wake up and say, ouch, kind of thing. And we'll say, sorry, kind of thing. We didn't mean to hurt you. So the machines, it's usually somebody will ask during a course, so I cover some of the questions as I chat through it with y'all, is like, what about if they're laying in water or wet? Generally speaking, we'd never suggest that this should be submerged, like in a pool situation. I mean, if they're in a pool, pull them out of it or whatever, kind of thing. But if you're laying on a wet sidewalk, this machine will do just fine unless you're touching the patient. It's not going to electrocute you, okay? There are no instances in all the years that these machines have now been around, so since the early 90s anyways, that they've become somewhat more commonplace, there are no instances of a rescuer, lay public or otherwise, being electrocuted by their defibrillator from standing in water. Okay. Like I say, you need to probably get them out of, if you anything, you just need to get them out of the water, because what happens when you have water on skin and you're trying to put sticky stuff on it? It's no different than a Band-Aid, right? It just doesn't stick. Right. So at some point you gotta get them dried off a little bit. But the fact that they're laying outdoors on wet grass, in a snowbank, whatever the case might be, should not preclude you from using this machine. Okay? It's not like other electrical wires, like when we see downed wires that we're worried about the electricity conducting over a long distance. In this machine, in the case of this machine, you don't have to worry about that. So that is the AED in a nutshell. The last two things I want to talk about tonight. One is people always ask about babies, and again, we don't have a lot of time to go into every detail about the baby, but one of the big things I tell people about baby situations is babies usually go into cardiac arrest. Babies' hearts usually don't stop from heart attacks. Babies' hearts usually stop because they suffocate. Okay, they stop breathing, or they have a breathing abnormality. They have a congenital defect with their lungs, something of that nature. They don't generally stop breathing from a heart attack. They just don't have bad arteries. They haven't eaten enough McDonald's yet in life. They haven't, to cause them to be that kind of sick. So the first couple things I tell people, again, call 911 right away. Again, jostle baby, shake and shout. Don't do shaking baby syndrome to them. But I mean, you can give them a pretty good wiggle or whatever. I have a new grandson. He's like 6 weeks old. For the first 6 days, I drove my wife nuts because I was like, when I touched him, it felt like China. I have 4 daughters, by the way. They're all like college age and older. And she said, geez, don't you remember this? I said, no, kind of thing. I said, for God's sake, you're a paramedic. Just touch him. And I'm like, and so it was really bad first few days with him, but they really are, babies will move around pretty well, so I'm learning again. And you can give them a pretty good little jostle there, whether you're burping them or whether you're giving them a little shake, you can give them a pretty good little shake to try to get them awake. And if they don't wake up, again, as a paramedic, in all the years I've done this, thankfully we don't have to go to that many really sick baby runs. Like I say, again, it's not like television. The vast majority of the runs we go on are for people that are over 70 years old. Probably 85% of what we do are for people over 70 years old. Sorry if there's any 70-year-olds in the room. By the way, I just point out that older people get sick more often, okay? And babies don't. We used to say, try to find a pulse on the baby, finding it in their brachial artery under their arm. Right? I couldn't find that. Been a paramedic 20 years, I couldn't find the brachial artery on a baby. So if I shake and shut the baby, and baby's doesn't arouse for me to some degree, doesn't make some little squeaky baby noises, okay? In these cases, the first thing I am going to do is try to blow a little air in the baby. Why? Because even though it's poisonous air, if we can get the lungs to expand and contract, we might get things to start to move and happen, okay, in babies. Because again, it's not their heart that caused them to run a cardiac arrest, it's their lungs, in almost every case. All right, so we get to baby. The biggest mistake you can make, the only mistake you can make, is dropping them. I know that sounds awful, but it really is. Find a hard, flat surface to put baby on. Okay? The kitchen table is great. The floor is hard a little bit because it's hard to get down there to them. But like I say, good firm table or surface, kitchen counter, whatever. Find a surface you can put baby on. Don't try to hold them and treat them. Okay, as far as especially the way public goes, we don't even like to try to hold them and treat them because the scenes are so emotional and so charged that the potential is for dropping them. Okay? When you get there, give baby 2 quick breaths. Like, remember in the old days they used to tell you with adults like yank their head back and open their airway. With babies, if we yank their head back, we actually pinch off their trachea because it's so tiny. So we tell them, put them in a sniffing position. Now what does that mean? It means just tilt their head just a little bit backwards like they're smelling, like your dog does, kind of thing. Put their head back, take your mouth, cover their mouth and nose. Don't try to pinch their nose like the old days. The nose and the mouth all go to the same lungs, okay? Give 2 puffs of breath out of your cheeks. Don't give them a full breath because you don't want to blow up their lungs in here. If I give this mannequin a full breath of my lungs, I can actually pop his lungs or whatever, on a plastic mannequin. So just give 2 puffs. And for those of you sitting right here, you can see his chest move just a little bit when I did that, okay? 2 breaths, go down here, give 30 compressions. This time do count, or come pretty close to counting. You're gonna be pretty excited. And these are really unfortunate and sad situations, so they're hard to deal with.
Yeah.
Give 30, and give 2 more breaths. And keep that going until EMS arrives, okay? When we get there, we're gonna scoop the baby up. We're gonna get him out to the truck, because most of our equipment for neonates, little tiny babies, are out in the ambulance or whatever. We're not even gonna bring it in the house with us. We're gonna do it all right in the back of the ambulance. So from that point in time, you're not gonna see much going on. Okay. A lot of times our colleagues at the police departments, the sheriffs, they'll be bringing the baby out to us. We know when it's a bad one, when these guys have in their arms coming to the truck, when we get there. So that's baby treatment. The last item I'm going to talk about tonight, before I turn things over to the sheriff's department, are kind of the newest thing since the AED, but a lot cheaper. By the way, if anybody's curious, an AED like this one, you can buy these for about, I think the last one we bought was $16 $1,600. They've come down in price, actually. The first ones we bought were about $3,000 back in the day. They're down to about $1,600 for brand new devices. And so you can buy them fairly inexpensively. And like I say, a lot of places in this area have them. I hope it's because we've been out there telling people that where people congregate, you should have one of these devices. Because they really do help save lives. So if you're ever looking for a good fundraiser for your community, for your church, whatever, you talk about doing an AED fundraiser, you usually have everybody on board pretty fast, or whatever. If you ever want to do something like that for an organization that you belong to and you really like to have them, please feel free to call us at the EMS. We'll be happy to come out and tell whoever it is that you might be raising the funds with or from, why it's important that you have the device. Okay? But the next most important device, and we're putting these inevitably in where all the AEDs are, and you can put them anywhere else, by the way. We're just putting where the AEDs are, so everything's in a common place. And this is a new program that the federal government rolled out. It's called the Stop the Bleed Kit. It's called the Stop the Bleed program. And what we know that kills people is the stuff that we just talked about: the Heimlich, the choking victim, the heart attack victim, the AED. We know that heart problems, breathing problems, that's what kills people. And we know that the lay public can correct those problems before we ever arrive and provide good treatment. The lay public can also provide treatment for severe bleeding. Okay? And so that's what we're going to close out with tonight is the severe bleeding issues. So people die because their heart stops. People die because they stop breathing. So those are mechanical failures. People also die from fluid failures. And fluid failures are, some of them are metabolic. We can't control those. I mean, stuff goes wrong with the chemistry of your body, right? And some of it's because we just lose fluid, i.e. we bleed, okay? And so the idea is if we can keep the fluid in the body, we can generally avert death in a lot of cases. A lot of people in this country bled to death for a long time. And part of the reason they bled to death was years ago, so I'm going back to the late 70s, early 80s, I was a Boy Scout, and we were putting tourniquets on people. Those scarves that I think scouts still wear around their neck, they told us to roll those up, put them around their time, and not put a stick in it and twist it and stop bleeding. And then somebody along the line, because medicine always changes, says, oh boy, but they could lose their limb over that. Don't ever put another tourniquet on again. And so we went through 20, almost 30 years of never putting another tourniquet on. And then we went to war. And we had soldiers bleeding to death because nobody would use a tourniquet because they might lose a limb. Well, I know a number of amputees in my life. Some of them I've created, unfortunately, because I've put a tourniquet on. And I'll tell you, they're all pretty glad to be alive with their prosthetic. Okay? So we've gotten back to using tourniquets. And we've made them like really super easy to use, although there are other ways you can use them. I'm going to talk about that as well before I get out of here tonight. So the government came up with this cool little Stop the Bleed program. And again, they've tried to make it as simple as possible by putting some directions here on how to stop bleeding. But really, it's not all too terrible. This isn't rocket science in order to do this. A Stop the Bleed Pro kit has a few things in it. It has a heavy gauze bandage. It has some what we call clinger or like an adhesive bandage in it, and it has a tourniquet. And oh, by the way, it has a pair of gloves in there if you don't want to get the other person's blood on you. Okay, so these kits in this area we're putting with all the AEDs. We've put them in most of the police cars in the area. And, we put them in the school offices, places that you can get people who are, in fact, bleeding to death. In our day and age, we know terrible things are happening out there, in our schools, in our churches, and other public places where people are, injured by people doing horrible things with knives and guns and bombs at times. And what we know is we've lost some of those people because we weren't tourniqueting people. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about bleeding and how to control it. Bleeding is fairly easy in most cases to control. Even big, open, gaping wounds generally control easily with a couple simple steps. Okay? One of the simple steps is simply pressure. Okay? So in here, in the bleeding control kits, we put kind of a surgical kind of gauze that absorbs a lot of blood. Now, that's handy if you have the kit, but not everybody has the kit. But you know what just about every woman has in their purse? They have a feminine napkin. Now, there is a device that was made for nothing else but controlling bleeding. They really absorb blood well. And so I tell people all the time, you don't have the kit? Find the first lady you can, see if she doesn't have a feminine napkin in her purse if you need to control significant bleeding, and use it, or whatever. So, if we find somebody who's bleeding, their arm's cut really badly, I'm going to borrow Joe here again, a couple things. One is, lay them down on the ground. Why? Because people like faint at the sight of their own blood. That's a real thing. Okay, people actually do have a psychological reaction to the sight of their own blood. And so we lay them down as much as we can, just so they don't collapse on us while we're in the middle of treating them. If they won't lay down, because some people get real anxious, at least sit them down. Okay, we're going to have Joe stand because it's easier for all of you to see. Raise the limb that's bleeding over the level of the heart. Why? You know, it's using gravity to your favor. It's putting Isaac Newton in the driver's seat, if you will. Make the heart work harder to pump blood to the injured location. That alone will slow some of the bleeding. Okay? Put whatever your absorbing rag is on there, and I will tell you, I've seen everything used from, you know, a commercially made device to a shop rag. Shop rags work great, by the way, if that's what you've got to work with. Right. I've seen people take their own t-shirt off, yep, you know, kind of thing, and use it. So just find something that absorbs blood, get it on there, and get pressure on there. When I say get pressure on there, get pressure on there, okay? If the patient's not saying, ouch, that's a little uncomfortable, you're not putting enough pressure on it if they're bleeding significantly, all right? Normally speaking, if you put enough pressure on there, they'll also say, hey, my fingers are tingling, or my toes are tingling. And if you look a little bit at the end of their fingers, you'll see them actually turn a little white. Okay? Right. And hold it there. If all else fails, just hold it. Get 911 called and hold it. Do nothing more. Now, there's going to be cases when you have to do more. Maybe you have to move the person. Maybe you're somewhere that you can't get to a phone right away. Maybe you're hiking in the backwoods behind your house. You know, whatever the case is. There may be cases when all you have for that pressure is this. Is the heel of your hand. And if that's the case, if you care about the person, or even if you don't, you just want to do the right thing, put your hand in there and push. Okay? The other thing that comes in most of these kits, and what I suggest, ever got a box of Band-Aids at home? Yeah. Throw them the heck away. I have yet to see a Band-Aid save a life in the entire time I've ever been doing EMS work. No, you can keep your Band-Aids around. And we all need them. I know, you know, I turned 50, the doctor makes me take an aspirin every day now. And since I've been taking that darn aspirin, you know, every time I nick my finger, it bleeds for half an hour. Right. So it thins your blood. I mean, that's what it's supposed to do. But, you know, I keep some Band-Aids around now. I used to have to keep a Band-Aid around. I used to just do that if I cut my finger and, you know, it stopped. But, you know, but nowadays I have to keep a Band-Aid because my finger bleeds so long. But if you have a Band-Aid in your house, go to CVS and buy a roll of roller gauze and have it somewhere in your medicine cabinet with all the other stuff that you generally never have to use. Okay? Don't buy the cheap stuff, by the way. Buy the most expensive roller gauze they sell. It'll cost you all about $3. All right? The cheap stuff will cost you 59 cents, but it doesn't stick. It doesn't work very well. Okay? So you put this on, you're holding it, and you're thinking, man, I'm holding it, but I gotta get to a phone and call 911, and you know, I'm trying to hold this on and what have you. Find your roller gauze, get it on there, and just wrap it around the wound. And when you wrap each wrap tighter than the last one. Okay? I'm not gonna hurt Joe here. I like him. Okay. But we are gonna just keep wrapping that around there. And when do we stop wrapping? We stop wrapping when we're out of roller gauze. okay? And you just keep wrapping it around. And this stuff actually just kind of sticks to itself. So you don't even need tape, you don't need a Band-Aid, you don't need anything to hook to the end of there. You just put it on there and you leave pressure on the wound. Okay, so that will slow a lot of bleeding. That will slow most all bleeding. Now there is people, and I'm going to take this off because I did put it on there pretty tight and I actually don't want to cut off the circulation in his hand. Okay, now that, like I say, deep wounds, they'll be pouring blood out of them. You know, they'll look terrible, but generally you can stop the bleeding with this. The wounds that you can't stop bleeding from, generally, are bleeding that hits an artery. Arteries are actually not very easy to hit. They're incredibly deep. You know, it's the way we were created, right? The arteries are way down near the bone in most cases. And so unless you are cut really badly, or unless something penetrates you like a bullet or a knife or something of that nature, generally people will not bleed from arteries. Okay? They bleed from arteries from shrapnel wounds, like I say, bullets, knives, things of that nature. But not just from a standard cut. Okay? I've seen very few people bleed from an artery from a chainsaw cut, believe it or not, by comparison. See a lot of people out here get cut with a chainsaw. They generally don't get deep enough with a chainsaw to get an artery, believe it or not. They get deep enough that they have a lot of bleeding that we control with pressure, but they don't hit the artery with it. Okay. So the interestingly, you know some of the wounds that bleed the least? Just an interesting trivia for you. Complete amputations. Complete amputations bleed less than a lot of other cuts. Why? Because, like I say, again, part of our makeup, part of our genetic ability to live, is that when we cut vessels completely through, they actually shrink up and suck up on the end like this. And so they actually stop bleeding pretty fast. It's vessels that are torn long ways that bleed longer. So that's not always exactly the case, but I will tell you, you know, in generally, very general terms, that is the case. Okay, so when we see an arterial bleed, we absolutely know it. Why? Because with every beat of the heart, it will squirt blood out of the artery. And if you cut a deep enough artery, it'll squirt that blood a few inches up in the air. I'm not talking about feet. It's not going to squirt across the room. But it will squirt. You will know if you've ever seen one. If you've ever seen an artery cut, you would absolutely know it. Someone in the room may have, or whatever. If some of you that are deer hunters may have seen a deer where you hit an artery. And you get to the animal right after you've shot it, if you will, and not being gross, but then you'll see blood still pumping. That's an artery hit. Looks the same in a human being. Okay. For those kind of injuries, the only thing you can do to really correct those injuries is put a tourniquet on the individual. Okay. What I brought with me today is the commercial tourniquets that they put in these Stop the Bleed kits. We'll talk a little bit about other things that you can use for a tourniquet besides this, okay? Like I said, a lot of the police officers actually have these. They carry them now in their cars or on their person for a couple reasons. One is, you know, heaven forbid we have an incident in a school or in a church and they have to go in and neutralize the shooter so that we can get in and take care of the other injured people. They go in before we do. And if they come across a victim who really needs a tourniquet, they might have a second where they can get it on them and hopefully save them. The other and terribly unfortunate piece of that would be an officer actually himself becoming wounded, realizing he had an arterial bleed, and actually you can put this on by yourself. You don't need a second. You don't need a second individual to put it on. So they actually train our officers to take care of themselves, heaven forbid they're injured in a situation like that. So these are, like I said, this is incredibly easy to use. You find the limb, you put it on, it's all Velcro, right? In the world of Velcro shoes, everybody's got this stuff. You Velcro it tight, okay? Now actually, if I was doing this for real, I would have pulled this as hard as my muscles would let me pull it to get the initial bite in there. It's got a built-in stick. Remember I said we used to wrap our handkerchief around it and put a stick in there and twist it? Yeah. This one's got a built-in stick. So all we do is we twist that around, and then it's got a little spot that the stick locks in. Your tourniquet is on. It'll stop the arterial bleeding. So basically just on, Velcro, just like people Velcro their shoes. Velcro shoes kind of have gone out of style a little bit, but they used to be around a lot. Velcro it on there. Twist until you can't twist it anymore. Lock it in. There's a little spot on there that they want you to put the time. Don't worry about that if you lay in public so much. We try to put the time on if we use one. But again, the time's not going to save anybody's life. It just lets the surgeon know how long that's been on there. Or whatever, gives them a rough idea. So we always just giggle at that, like we're going to take time to break the time in there. But they really work great, and they're that simple. I mean, if you think the AED was pretty simple, this is really, really simple. Pull, Velcro, twist. It's all done, okay? And they will absolutely stop the bleeding. We had a situation with a conservation officer 2 falls ago. Gentleman was injured while getting his tree stand. I think it was here in Casco or it was up in Columbus. It was in this area. And the conservation officer got there first, clearly saved the man's life. He got there, he had his tourniquet with him, put it on the gentleman's leg. The gentleman would have been dead before we could have got there. Because from a big artery, somebody will pump out all their blood in about 3 or 4 minutes. The conservation officer just happened to be on the same road the gentleman was on, got to him right away, got the tourniquet on, like I say, and because of him, the gentleman survived. So like I said, they're really great. Now, having said that, not everybody's got a tourniquet laying around, kind of thing. Having said that, you can buy these. You can go online, you can put, tourniquet online. You'll come to these. They're about $30 a pop for this, to buy this one. But there's a lot of other things you can use to develop your tourniquet. You can use anything that is, that you can basically make into a rope or string. If I take that same old stuff that I had here, and as opposed to wrapping with it, okay, I make it into a rope, I put it above here, I tie it off, again, put a knot in it. I don't care if it's a granny knot, I don't care if it's a square knot, I don't care what kind of knot you put in there, okay? Knot it, but when you do this overhand this way, take your ink pen, put it in there, that becomes your twist. Twist it till it's tight. You just made a tourniquet with your $3 roller gauze. Okay? A piece of rag will work, by the way. Again, you can take a piece of t-shirt and cut a strip out of it or not, and do that. Shoelace, anything you can turn into a quick little rope. Just make sure you put something in there to twist, and something that's reasonably strong. But the only mistake I've ever seen people make doing this, quite honestly, is they they'll be out like in the woods or something, and they'll try to help somebody. They like to use a twig that's too little and the twig breaks. Because the whole idea is to be able to twist it or whatever. So find something. So the little stainless steel pen works okay. A plastic pen might not work so well, it might break. Kind of thing. I'm glad I had that in my pocket all the way, so I wasn't sure what I was going to use there for a minute. I did just make that up as I went along. Anyhow, just those are the really quick stop the bleed things you can do for people. Pressure first, wrap, tourniquet if you see squirting blood. Okay, and those are really the things you can do to save lives. Band-aids are nice. And like I say, we don't like to bleed all over things. So Band-aids, you don't get a bad rap. But yes.
How far up from the squirting blood do you
Great question. They just say, you want to get reasonably close to the wound. So I mean, as long as you're 3-4 inches away, you're good. But the closer you can get to that wound, the better off you're going to be, or whatever. And especially if it does get into a case where there has to be, in the very extreme cases, an amputation. At least, if you've gone farther up, then the amputation is potentially farther up, kind of thing. I will tell you that in most cases, it wasn't a lot of evidence that tourniquets even caused the need for amputation. There just wasn't, the evidence didn't support it. Normally, if you release it, most surgeons tell us within a couple of hours. And there's going to be very few cases when we can't, in this area, where we can't get you to a hospital in a couple of hours. Might be different on the battlefield, kind of thing. But in this area, even though we live in a semi-rural area kind of here, we can get you a surgeon in 2 hours here. So just about from wherever you are, wherever you're stuck. And as long as we can get you there in a couple of hours, they release the tourniquet and then they go in there and clamp vessels, kind of thing. So they don't keep you in the tourniquet once they get you to the hospital. We just don't go in with clamps and clamp vessels. That's for the doctors. So with that was about an hour and 20 minutes, and I know the Sheriff's Department is here tonight as well, so I want to leave them some time. I can take a couple minutes worth of questions if you have any particularly that, something you were dying to ask.
Yeah, what causes somebody to choke in the first place? I mean, did they not chew their food good, or were they breathing wrong at the same time?
Both. It can be. It can be that they didn't chew well. It can be that they. It can be that they. It can be that they. It can be that they didn't chew well. It can be that they sucked air in. A big laugh. Kind of thing. Your mom always said, like, don't talk when you're eating, kind of thing. There might have been a reason for that other than just it's gross, but it doesn't take a huge piece of food to block somebody's airway. It takes everything being in the right position. Usually the meat, if you will, and that's usually what it is in most of these cases, doesn't stick in the airway. It doesn't stick in there like a clog. What happens is there's a little flap of skin in there, we call it the epiglottis in it, and when we swallow, it covers the trachea so that food glances off it and goes into the esophagus and into your stomach. What generally speaking happens in choking victims is that flap of skin closes, the food falls on top of the trap door and holds the door down. The food doesn't usually get past the trap door and into the trachea. Those are the cases when it does, when we usually have to get it out. But in most choking cases, it just blocks the trap door, and when you guys do the Heimlich maneuver, you force the air up and the trap door open, basically.
This has happened to my wife a few times at a restaurant, and it's like, what do? She said they're choking, finally she clears it.
Right.
But it's embarrassing.
Right. And like I say, and sometimes, and I'm not saying this is the case with your wife, but we see it we see it for two reasons. We see people, kind of talking or breathing a little bit when they eat. We see them that aren't just chewing their food enough times. I gulp food. I think a lot of first response people do that because, we're always eating fast before we have to go on the next run. My wife's an incredibly slow eater. She's one of those people that chews her food 100 times before she starts to swallow it, so we'll be at a restaurant and I'll be done eating and she'll, have her first forkful of salad in her mouth, kind of thing. She's probably going to be much healthier and live a lot longer than I am. But you do see those things. The other things you do see where we see swallowing issues is where we see extra swallowing issues, like people who have had some level of stroke or something like that, where really they recover pretty well from it, but there's still just a little bit of paralysis in areas of their body they don't even realize, and we see them have a little bit of choking problems from time to time. So, other questions? Got it. So let me again give you this number, because we covered, like I say, we covered 6 hours in an hour and 25 minutes. So there's a lot more information, and I gave you the really broad kind of executive summary of what first aid and CPR look like, if you will. But to get really down into the details, 586-727-2184. The entire program takes about 6 hours to do. If you want to do it, like I say, at a local church, if they want to do one here at Casco Township, where we started on a Saturday morning, and did it. If you want to come out to the building, to the new building, we love to show people around, and we're happy to do those kind of programs, for you. If we're doing them because the only people we charge for programs are people who are using their CPR card for professional license. So if you're a doctor, a nurse, or whatever, and you're making a good living because you have a CPR card, we charge you. But if you're learning CPR at first aid because, like most of you in the room, because you're part of a neighborhood watch group, a Boy Scout leader, a soccer coach, or whatever it might be, we just want you to know it, and we do that for absolutely no cost. So, and we can break it up into a couple nights. 6 hours can be a long time, so you want to break it up over a couple nights, we can do that as well. All right. If there's nothing else, I'll turn it back over to Wayne, and I'm going to sit in and listen to what the sheriff has to say.
Okay, I'd like to introduce our liaison from the Sheriff Department. This is Sean O'Donnell. So I hope you get a few words you can say.
Yep. I think I've met actually most of you guys. We only had a couple of us that were able to show up to our first or our last official meeting. Then I came to the board meeting as well, spoke to a few of you. I know everybody's really excited about this program. Everybody that I've ever had that has started a program in the county has always loved it. The only thing that's ever become a hiccup anywhere is the fact that things start to die off. Things become uninteresting, people become uninterested. The program works too well, right? The crime rate, things in the neighborhood start to decrease. All of a sudden, the feeling and the need that we've got everything handled is there, and then all of a sudden, meetings stop, and then things that we were concerned about as a community before start to arise, and everybody kind of wonders why. It's because we kind of went back to the mindset that we had before neighborhood watch program was started. With that in mind, especially since we've started this program, the one thing that I've seen an increase in within the community is the increase in suspicious call activities through our 911 system. So what that means is somebody is seeing something and saying something, which is really the essence of what this program is all about. Seeing something that doesn't make sense, seeing something odd, seeing somebody at your neighbor's house that you know probably shouldn't be there, calling 911, calling our dispatch center and letting us know, hey, there's something that's just not right, can your officer take a look? Of course, we're always more than happy to do that. So that has actually increased. At no point do I ever want anybody to feel bad because you think that you're burdening us, or, I know they're busy, I don't really want to, I'd rather you bother us now and for us to go check out something that might be suspicious. And for us to be able to either prevent something, because sometimes just us driving around the area, we might not find something, but that might just be enough deterrent that somebody's not going to be maybe breaking into houses, breaking into cars, and doing something else that they really shouldn't be doing. They're out to do in our neighborhoods, right? So at the end of the day, we'd rather be doing that than sitting in your house or sitting in your neighbor's house later on for hours at a time, trying to figure out all the things that may have been damaged inside their house or inside their car, things like that, or trying to get their stuff back. Which any of you who have had their stuff broken into, I know I have, is a very frustrating and belittling feeling to know that somebody's been into your private things and gone through that. So I can speak to this from personal experience. I would do it a million times, run on calls for suspicious activities, and I know my partners will as well, to hopefully deter anything that's going on and to find some things. The biggest number, and I don't think anybody's going to be surprised, especially the fact that we have the expressway, is the fact that, and this is just within the last 2 months, January 1st till today, we've had about 176 traffic incidents. Now that's not traffic stops, that's car accidents, rollovers, vehicles in the ditch, car versus deer. I mean, anything that involves a vehicle being damaged, us being dispatched to it, that's kind of what a lot of those are. But again, a lot of those are generated from the interstate. A couple of things that I've seen that have gone down, and I think that a lot of that goes back to the suspicious activity calls that are going up, is the fact that we've had less larcenies in the area. It's still higher than it was, let's back that up. It's lower than it was before, but it's still kind of high, especially for this area. Just in the last couple of months, we've had 5, and then a couple of larcenies from vehicles. So I know that's still like our concern. Even though we look on a map and geographically it's a big area, but a lot of it's farm agricultural area that we have out here, very sparse. So I'd like to see that number get down. I'd like to see our suspicious calls to 911 increase, and then to hopefully deter those calls and have those on decrease. I was very excited. Mr. Baumgart sent me an email. It's actually the first time I've ever seen it sent out. I think everybody in the room was making comments about it, having the stickers or the magnets to put on your on your refrigerator or anywhere else, just to kind of remind you guys the non-emergency number of the 911. If you're anywhere, don't feel like you have to run back to get the non-emergency number to call us. It doesn't bother the dispatchers one way or the other. We're willing to take the call. But on the same token, some of us feel like, okay, that's what the number's there for. So if you guys don't feel like you want to stress out the 911 system, you're more welcome to call the non-emergency number. At the end of the day, it's the same person who's going to be answering the phone. So with a little peace of mind, you have both numbers there that you can contact somebody.
It's on my cell phone.
Yep, a lot of people started to put it on their cell phone, and you know, like that was mentioned earlier, the issue that we have with technology is that technology through 911 systems are two different technologies that allow for GPS tracking for phones versus GPS tracking through our Google apps and our Fitbit watches and all these other technologies they have. And for some reason, they haven't been able to merge the two together. That's the biggest problem that our dispatch centers have, and it's not just St. Clair County; it's dispatch centers everywhere else that are going on. So sometimes we're able to ping the phone, and it depends on what your carrier is and things like that. That they have more success on. Sometimes the best thing, and I've been on it before. Hey, we got a hunter lost in the woods, and they are 1.6 miles from this cell tower. Great, draw a map, big circle, start finding, right? Like, so that kind of goes back to where we're at. You know, sometimes depending on what your carrier is, what your service is, you're able to figure that out. A lot of times it'll populate on there that, you know, if you're making a payment and you're on Meldrum Road, that's where it's going to tell you. But hey, I'm on 94 somewhere, you know, right? So
obviously, if you're not at your physical residence, you're going to want to at least give them your location.
Right. Yep. So just kind of, and I think that kind of sets back into what this program is intended to, is to kind of be aware of your surroundings, know what your surroundings are, know who the people are around you, know where you're at, so that way when anything happens, you're able to relay that information best. Because at the end of the day, I mean, I've done it a million times. I'm busy. I can't get around my wall charger. My phone battery, I think like everybody else, lasts about 2.7 hours. So when it's all said and done, like I'm on 1% battery, and that's the time that something major is going to happen. I need to call. So if there's only one short message that you could ever get out on the phone, at least it's an address that we can come to, right? Because if they'll at minimum send us to go figure out what's going on, because at least they have an address. Hey, the caller hung up. They gave us an address. You know, I don't know what's going on. We'll go check it out. So at least we can go there and find out, hey, you know, maybe it's, I mean, if it's anything major, hopefully we're getting more calls, but at minimum we can figure out, hey, we need fire out here for a rescue, or we need paramedics out here for medical, or hey, it's something we need and we need more backup, or whatever the case is. But at least if we have if we don't have an address and you said, hey, I'm having a medical, you know, and we couldn't get a phone ping or anything like that, you know, we're at a loss. But if you tell us where to go first, we can figure out what the what is later, which is, it's more important to know where you're at than it is what it is that you really need, right? Again, my big emphasis that I made at the township meeting, and there's more of you here, so I'm going to make it again, is to really know who your neighbors are. Start like interacting with people, that going back to like pre-cell phone and Facebook, right? Like really knowing who your people are, your neighbors are, things like that. Talking to people, figuring this out, you know, knowing who your community people are and who should be in the area and who shouldn't, that kind of thing. And then just kind of, you know, being proactive in things. If you have a lot of valuables in the house, take pictures of them, you know, store them on a phone somewhere else, or on a computer, or on a flash drive, and hide the flash drive. I mean, you know, who knows what could happen. And then lock your, like the number one thing, just lock your doors. You know, 9 times out of 10, we're having people that are just pulling on doors to find out what's locked and doing the easy way, right? I think we all like to work smarter, not harder, and that this is for them. This is work, right? So they're gonna find the houses, or find the doors, or find the cars that are easier to get to, things that don't light up when they walk up to, things that they've been driving around and, oh, that car looks unlocked, or you know, we've been in there before, things like that. So if at anything else, just lock your things up, lock your house, lock your cars. And that will at least help to deter an increase in criminal activity against other neighbors. Any questions? I didn't have mannequins and trainers and everything else. So let's break that down. I just have numbers and facts. That's all I have. I didn't even make those facts up in numbers. It's information I read off to you. So,
how many cars do you have, like, say, in this area? Or saying, was there a bad time in the middle of the night when you're not going to have as many cars out there where we might have get a response?
So, in the entire county, at certain times of the evenings and certain times of the day, there's varying numbers of cars. To give all that out, especially since we're recording, we'll keep a caution on what our numbers truly are. But understand that because we're not in the dedicated township, there might be a time delay versus China, East China, City of Algonac, Fort Gratiot, Fort Huron Township, referencing just the Sheriff's Department, where those are dedicated communities that they have cars that are specific, just like City of Port Huron or Marysville or Richmond, where they have officers that are specifically dedicated just to that. They're contracted to have officers specifically dedicated to those communities. So
That's for non-emergency. If we call 911, you guys are here.
they will dispatch the closest car, correct, but where that car comes from in relationship to where we are, I mean, there might not be a car in Casco Township.
Right.
We might be in St. Clair Township, we might be, the only car available might be from Michigan Road.
Right, I live on St. Clair Highway, and there was an accident a couple of years ago right from my house, 4th of July weekend. And I was shocked on how quick the sheriffs were there, and you guys were there fast.
And a lot of that comes from us doing our regular patrols, just, going into areas, driving around, like, we don't stick the same path all the time. Every officer has their own little idea on where they want to drive and hang out and look for. And some of that comes from the community, okay? So if we have a neighborhood watch program here, which we do, right, we're hearing that there's a lot of things on Melvin Road. There's this weird thing that keeps going on every Tuesday night on Melvin Road. Okay, so guess what's happening on Tuesday night? We're rolling around Melvin Road more on Tuesday night. Because at the end of the day, we get to a stop sign, I don't have a major gate ball to know, man, am I gonna make a left or make a right? The easiest, as far as that part, right, when I was a paramedic working for Tri-Hospital, like, that was easy. Why? Because I sat at my station and I watched TV until the alarm went off and they said, this is where you're going. Cool, now I know where I'm going. I don't have to make that decision, other than like maybe what I'm gonna eat for breakfast. But now when I get in a car and I get to a stop sign, I don't know if I'm gonna go straight, right, or left. I just kind of roll the dice, like, oh, that looks cool, I'm gonna go over this way.
Right.
Unless I know something's going on this way, and then I'm gonna make that left, because we know that there's more things going on, right? So the more that we know for the community, right, and Mr. Baumgarten and I have talked about some different things, and maybe trying to get some things set up so that way we have that line of communication. But at least within the community, if you guys know that there's stuff that's going on and can relay that for yourselves, right? So like, maybe you know that there's some weird stuff that's been going on at a neighbor's house down the road, right? So instead of going directly to home, like, as neighbors, maybe we're just taking that extra loop to drive around, right? Because the people that can police our own neighborhoods more than the police can are the people that live there.
I got followed one time by a neighbor that thought I was up to something, I was just out taking photos.
Sure, but now you met the neighbor,
She
right?
was followed, no, she kept her distance, but it's
Okay.
like, I only live like over there.
Sure. But on the same token, it's nice to know that even though,
Somebody was paying attention.
right, I'd rather have people follow me all day long and trying to figure out what I'm doing when I'm in my own house or my own
I
community.
was
or
taking
Yeah.
pictures of old dead trees.
Sure.
Sometimes they're kind of cool.
Right.
Well, I had one time where I was up in Richmond, and when I was with the high school at the time, they had a building trades program. They built a few houses around the town, and I had saw one, and I was just looking at it. I said, wow, they kept it in good shape. Matter of fact, they improved about it. And I rolled past it up to the stop sign, and the car came beside me, and he goes, hey, what you doing? Check out my neighbor's house. And I says, hey, that was one of the building trades house, and then they says, okay.
That's right. So, unless there's any more questions, at the end of the day, this is your neighborhood watch program. This isn't mine. I'm just here to help, like, be that mediator between law enforcement and the community. So, this is yours to make of it however you want, right? Other than, I can come in here and give you guys stats and tell you guys to lock your doors all day long. That only goes so far, right? I think this is a good idea, having Richmond Lennox being able to come here and explain some different things that we could use on a daily basis, like one more step to help us be safer in our communities. But if there's other things like that you guys are interested in doing, if there's ways that you want to take this neighborhood watch program, however you guys want to develop this and make this is your guys. This is your community. You guys set this up however you want. And we're more than happy to help you guys facilitate that. Find whatever it is, little things that you guys want to look at or see or hear about or things like that. I'm also tied in with emergency management. And there's really cool programs that come through with emergency management on a regular basis. They do a great job over there, knocking on the doors of the Fed saying, hey, you have a test program coming out? We'll be the guinea pigs, we'll test it. So we get all these cool test programs that, like, major cities aren't even getting, because our emergency management is going and trying to procure those things and saying, we'll do the test for you. So there's all kinds of programs that are out there that we're finding that's even just information-based that we can try to get to you guys. But if you know, it all comes down to what you guys want. So I think between now and at least the next meeting, that's something that you guys can think about. And I know this is a smaller community, so everybody knows Mr. Baumgarten. And if there's things that you guys have ideas about or you really want to know or see or hear, let Mr. Baumgarten know. And at least by that time of the next meeting, or that's something we can talk about in the next meeting, is where we want to grow for this neighborhood watch program. And that's what we can do is make that, there's no cookie cutter. I don't like the idea of a cookie cutter program because the problems that you have in Casco are the same problems that they have in China, or the same problems they have in Portage Township, or the same problems they have in Richmond. Everything's different, right? So it needs to be curtailed to what it is that you guys in the community want and need for you guys, okay? So that's something to think about, kind of mill that over, talk to each other, talk to the board, talk to Mr. Baumgarten, and we'll make this for you guys exactly how it should be for your community.
Thank you.
All right?
Thank you very much.
All right. Now that the weather's getting a little nicer, do you think that we'll see a little increase in issues?
So weather plays a role in everything, right? Like if you have to go outside and plow snow all day long, like, and you really hate the cold, you're probably not going to want to plow snow all day long, right? Same thing like those who are going out to do crimes and have to work outside, right, to get to your houses or cars and things like that. So, or driving around or doing anything else like that, like they're naturally with this state as it is, that when the weather's like garbage, everybody wants to stay home. There's not as much activity that's out. There's still a lot. I mean, we had 8 incidents where people had stuff stolen from them in 2 months, like once a week essentially. But will that number go up? Potentially, but because the summer's out, now there's roads are nicer. Now they don't have to worry about maybe getting their vehicles stuck when they're going down a 2-track or dirt roads or things like that, right? So, as the weather gets nicer, the potential for things to happen are increased. So, like right now, the fact that the weather's nice, it's even more important to be more diligent with what's going on because now the weather's getting nicer. Now we're going on vacations. We're getting outside of our own house more. We're doing the same things that everybody else is doing, right? So those, at times, can open us up to more vulnerability. So again, being more proactive, making sure our stuff's locked, talking to our neighbors, making sure they know we're gone, things like that to set ourselves up to help us protect ourselves. Because when we're out and about, everybody else that is after us, potentially, is doing the same thing.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. I just didn't know if it was, do we normally see a 20% increase or 50 or?
No, I mean like everything is completely fluid and different. I mean sometimes we'll see a huge influx in an area for a year, and that's because there's one group of people that are doing a whole bunch of B&Es or doing a whole bunch of stolen cars. And that's just their MO, and that's just what they do until we find them, and then we catch them, and then all of a sudden it goes down to 0. It doesn't matter what time it is, right? And then somebody else will move in, and they'll start doing the same thing, or they'll do different things, right? So some of it's not just based on, randomization. Some of it's based on like specific criminal activity that's going through from different groups of people. And so we can grab that group of person, and then it will drop down, and then start to move up. Somebody else is going to come in and still do the same thing, right? Nobody will ever stop stealing somebody else's stuff. Just how it gets done and who's doing it is always what's going to be the changing factor, right? So.
I have a question. So if 8 places had robberies in the last 2 months, were they in the same area? One question. Or is anyone caught of the 8 and did anyone get their stuff back?
So the unfortunate part for right now is the program that I have to get data does not allow me to specifically pick out the address and locations. Also, where I'm generally posted, I'm the Fort Gratiot car on nights. So like last year I was a freelance car, so I was in this area often. So I would know kind of what was going on, or at least have an idea. So as of right now, I don't know what those cases were. I was just able to get that pulled up today. Like I said, I'm trying to work on a new program that allows me to have a little bit more data for us when we come to these meetings, other than just like facts and numbers and general areas. But oftentimes I've seen when we have been able to do maps in the past that they are not. It's not 5 houses in a row or 5 houses on a street. It's usually going to be like in a geographic area, right? Like in Casco. Or like Casco, St. Clair Township. So we're getting when we're getting them in the county, it's not just Casco Township. Like, we'll have what we call a rash of beanies.
What were the 8 in Casco Township that you're referring to?
Yes, the numbers that I gave you guys as far as the accidents and the beanies and the suspicious, that's just for your community. So, yes, if that makes any sense. How, if they're tied in with, maybe there's, 3 in one night, maybe there was 5 in the county in one night, and 3 of them just happened to be here, and then 2 were,
But we don't know if anyone was apprehended or if anyone got their stuff back, or?
Right, right. Oftentimes, we'll find that that's based on, like I said, a criminal organization, a few groups of people doing the same thing, and until we can find that group of people, oftentimes that becomes our hitch, right? Is trying to find that people, because when they're happening in places that don't have any type of camera system. Because of the media in outlets to sell goods, like, I could probably go on my phone right now and get 15 different apps to sell my stuff, and that are not traceable by law enforcement. There are traceable ways for us to look for things, but some of that comes into how detailed somebody is with jewelry or other items in the house. Like, hey, my wife were to say, like, hey, I got my wedding ring stolen. Okay, what's it look like? I don't know, I sold it. Okay. Well, like, and just in Port Huron pawn shop, just today, like, they had bought and sold and dealt with like 10 silver wedding bands, right? So to try to narrow that down, and that's just there. That's not the other 15 pawn shops that are in St. Clair County or Macomb County or anything like that, because oftentimes we're finding too that if they're going to steal something, they're not going to just steal it and then hawk it in the same area. They're going to steal it from here and send it somewhere else, even if they live. So there's a lot of hiccups to coming into that, which is why I talked about before of having some type of security system, having some type of camera system, even if it's a motion-based hunting camera positioned somewhere outside the house where you can get license plates or things like that, or people calling in suspicious activities. That's when we've gotten the best details is when people are seeing stuff that doesn't make sense and calling and saying, hey, there's this weird car, and then we find a reason to make a traffic stop on that car, and then, hey, well, what are you doing from here? Like, you live nowhere around here, and you have some really neat burglary tools in your car.
My neighbor had the same truck in their driveway 3 times.
Right.
And they called, I don't know whatever happened to them.
Right. And that's the other hard part. Like, there's certain things that we know, but because of either ongoing investigation or thing like that, we can't, I can't share everything with you.
Sure.
But like that, I mean, like, that's the general process, and that part's not unique just to Casco. That's the same way throughout the entire county, through Macomb County, through Oakland County. Those are the difficulties that we have in finding is that, going back to what we said earlier, most people are becoming introverted. They do things with themselves or with close family members and contact with phones, and they don't know who anybody else is, and they couldn't tell you, what vehicle should even belong on the street. I know exactly. I could tell you what houses should have what vehicles on my street. Mostly because I'm weird, and that's just like where I'm at. But I'm not the only one. I know a lot of other people that do the same thing.
No, I was trained for incident investigation, so yeah, I'm the same way.
Right. So when those things pop up, like that's when we get our best investigations, when the community at large is able to call us and let us know what's going on.
Are any of these places near the freeway more for access to escape or paved roads or gravel roads?
I don't have the exact addresses where the incidences occur. But oftentimes that, for B&Es, location to the expressway does not play a factor into B&Es. It comes up to opportunities. What's not lit, what's open, what's unlocked.
Or it's not nice, expensive homes versus ones that are not as expensive?
They're all the same. There's no, they look at the opportunity is the same.
And if you get a new 50-inch TV or something, don't put
It's
the
right
box out
inside
for
the
the
Obviously.
trash so they see you got it,
Window.
kind of,
We'll put it in your trash line.
yeah. There you go, I can't afford one.
Any other questions at all?
minor things you just mentioned, you know, it's like for security, like myself, I don't have a security system, but I do leave lights on, and I do leave different lights on, so when I'm gone, or anything like that, so it kind of makes it look like something. You know?
Sure, yep. I mean, anything is better than nothing, right?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Would it benefit Casco Township if there was a system in place where the people of the community, when they know they're going to go on vacation, go to the constable and let the constable know, or come here to the township hall and say, okay, Mr. Rumenap, I'm gonna be gone for a week. Could you please let the neighborhood watch team know?
Sure.
So that they can keep an eye out for my property? It sounds like it's more of a communication issue with the people living in the township than it is so much for security. You know, we gotta get to know each other.
Right.
Is there a way we can set up something like that
Well,
with
let
the
your
township?
neighbors know too when you're going away.
Instead
A
of
lot of
just
times
going
if I
to
go
photos
away
on
for a while, I let like Stu know or I let Paul know
You
that
give
I'm gonna be
Paul a
gone to
call.
watch out for my house, you know?
Yeah, yeah,
In the same way as you go away,
right.
call me, say I'm gonna be gone for a few hours, or Greg, if he's gonna be gone, you know. I know I called him once when there's a guy in his yard that's gonna go over there and shoot him, and he says, well, no, he's supposed to be there, so.
Well, and that's the thing, is there any way we could have the township set up a program for the residents of the township feel secure, because there are HIPAA guidelines, there are things that you cannot say, there are names you cannot say. You've tried to, as best as you can, describe to and answer questions in regards to B&Es in the area. But there, like you say, you are limited with the amount of information you can give us at this time. So if the township could set up a program where the residents could come to the hall and let you know, because you are in head of neighborhood watch, maybe there's a phone tree, so to speak, that you could let the people near that residence know, hey, this person's gonna be out of town. You know, trusted, somebody that that could be
Well, yeah,
trusted
you
with
don't
that
wanna put it on
information.
Facebook saying, hey, I'm going away for a
No, God, no.
And post photos while you're there.
Right, no, it's just, you know,
I've seen a couple of different ways that's been done. I'll dig some up and try to have them out, like different ideas on approaching that.
could you please, because I think that it's the communication issue that we have with one another in the area that, you know, neighbor 2 doors down from me takes off for the winter months and their place gets ransacked and I didn't even know it, that they were snowbirds and they were in Florida. Had I known, I would have kept an eye out for their property, but I was never informed.
Now, some people don't want you to know, I guess they're not, I don't know.
Well, yeah, well, and then look what happened, that we weren't.
Yep, I'll look into that and try to see what I can come up with, at least some formulas.
Sounds good.
Anybody else? No? Guess it's time to go to bed.
Oh, wait, no, it's time to go bail out your yard, your flood.
Well, it only snowed about 6 inches while we were in here, so.
Yeah. Well, thanks everybody for coming, and I hope to see you again at the next meeting and
Thank you.
keep this thing going.
Wait,
Jeff?